this connection of, purification of speech and this purification of mind has an intimate connection. And in the context, how I have been speaking about sacred grammar and about the ways and means that Panini used to create his grammar, this is the basis, I believe, of Patanjali's work.
You mentioned Ayurveda as one of the aspects of physical culture, or tools, systems for the study of physical culture. What was the other?
Well, yoga is specifically connected with the mind.
Yes.
And Vyakarana, the Mahabhashya, this is dealing with speech. Now, what we...
Babaji,
Yes?
there is an invocation that's used quite widely, especially the Iyengar school of yoga, which deals with Patanjali and his the relationship between him and his and what you were talking about of purity of mind, body, and speech.
The three karanas. This is a very clear invocation invoking the three karanas. Go ahead, Manoj. Sorry for interrupting.
No, I just thought I would bring that in here, and whoever's interested can then Google the invocation, and they will find out the exact translation of what the invocation talks about, of how we are bowing down to Patanjali, who is in yoga. He is the it talks about mind, chittasa, vacha, body, and the dirt, the malam of the sharir. And then Vaidya Kena.
Right.
Anyway, it's an invocation bowing down to him, acknowledging that he purifies mind, body, and speech, which is what you were saying.
Right, and this is coming out of a considerable diversity of tradition. This invocation, because this invocation could even be coming from either Bhartrihari or Bhojdeva. It looks very familiar to me. I think I've seen it before. It's fairly clear. So one of the things that stands out to me about this is especially those in the last 100 years that have taken the Yoga Sutras to be applicable to physical culture yoga. To think of these things somehow related to physical culture, this is an obvious error, because the physical culture is really invested in the Charaka Samhita and is more connected to Ayurveda, the purification and the longevity of the body, than it is to the removal of ignorance and the obtaining of Atma Gyan, self-knowledge, and liberation from the vicissitudes and the changes and the suffering of the world, which is very specific in his Yoga Sutras. I'm going to divert for just a second here, because I think that there's 2 points that I want to make before we continue. One is the assumption that we've already discussed in previous classes regarding the progressive nature of human development. That we have an assumption, especially in the post-Enlightenment West, that we started out as ignorant primitives, And slowly, we became sophisticated culturally, and now we're at the pinnacle of culture. And this may make sense with our current discourse and with our education, but it stands at odds with some other cultures. And the traditional culture of India really looks at it almost opposite to this. That if we look at the thinking on the ages of man, man starts in this perfect state of total enlightenment in the Garden of Eden and so forth, and slowly falls until he reaches the current Kali Yuga, which is the lowest state of man. And I'm not saying that to obviously convince anybody that this is the case. This is an observation, but a reflection of this observation is to consider the grammarians that we are talking about, Panini, Patanjali, Bhartrihari. We'll go on to talk about Abhinavagupta. And it's not that Panini created a text and Patanjali then refined it and made it better, and then it went on to the next stage where Bhartrihari developed a sophisticated philosophy and Abhinavagupta was able to universalize this. Actually, the way that I see it and the way that I'm informed by my tradition is that Panini didn't have to create almost a self-commentary on Ashtadhyayi. That Panini didn't have to explain in the detail that later commentators would explain the Maheshwar Sutras. That it was assumed that everybody understood, that everybody knew. In the same way that a Panini wasn't even required 1,000 years or 2,000 years before Panini, because the knowledge that Panini gave us all in his Ashtadhyayi was common knowledge a couple thousand years before his time. So as the times change, and as traditions and knowledge actually become weaker according to the Indian tradition, then more and more developed commentary is required to bring the knowledge into the current circumstances of time and place, to keep the knowledge current. But this does not really enlarge or increase the knowledge. This is actually a decreasing of the knowledge. Okay.
Babaji?
Yes.
I've heard, I think, other folks suggest that that there are sometimes incredible spiritual geniuses who come up with extraordinary statements, first orally and then finally captured in writing. But they don't represent the rank and file, the general population. That is to say, there's a lot of depth, but there's not much breadth. What say you to that?
That is an excellent point, because we can take somebody like Adi Shankaracharya, who in all the academic scholastic texts you'll read, even the traditional texts, Adi Shankara is really seen to represent a major piece of Indian culture, especially traditional Indian culture. And you're right, Kailash, that he doesn't really represent the broad encompassing of Indian culture, that he actually represents a very kind of elite and specific thinking and social organization of Brahmins. But you see, to me, what is so fascinating about Indian culture is its diversity. That really, this to come up with these monoliths of Indian thinking or philosophy or religion, these universalizing of these Indian traditions and ways, is really a huge, huge illusion, because the reality of Indian traditions is that it's all local. It's local in terms of the family, it's local in terms of guru-disciple relationships, it's local in terms of the various sects and sampradayas and traditions. Everything is local. The authority on almost any matter or issue is not a scripture, is not a text, but is a person. It is the guru lineage, the sampradaya, meaning the housing of the guru lineage. This is true authority in Indian tradition. So that it's an excellent point that you made, Kailash, that these broad areas of thought are really somewhat artificial. We can see this very much, actually, in Patanjali. Patanjali is a figure that is almost universally accepted in India as the great authority, whether we're thinking of speech or yoga. And yet, if you look at the commentaries on the Yoga Sutras, and you look at the references made by various commentators, classical commentators. I mean, I'm speaking of Madhvacharya and Shankara and Vyasa and people like this, that there's actually a great deal of discussion and debate. One of the primary areas of discussion and debate is what was Patanjali in terms of a philosophical system? Where did he stand among the philosophical systems? Was he a votary of Sankhya, which in many ways can be seen as a dualistic system that recognized the existence of two separate things of spirit and matter? Or was he an Advaitin? Was he a non-dualist? Did he see reality as apparent reality as false, as an illusion? Or are there two ultimate things, like I say, spirit and matter? And this is a very long discussion, and it's far from conclusive. And this interestingly brings us into a question that we have to ask ourselves when we talk about the interpretation of Patanjali, which we're about to get into. We read some translations of Patanjali. We hear the interpretation from various teachers and yoga schools, and so forth. How do we arrive at an interpretation that is correct or meaningful? After all, if we look at the great commentators who were debating fine points of speech, language, and logic in these texts, they are even in disagreement and debate. So if we find that the great commentators, going back 1,000 or 1,500 years, are not in agreement on the meaning of a number of these things in Patanjali, then how can we trust the interpretations and translations of people who, I hate to say it, don't even know Sanskrit, are not masters of Sanskrit? And this is why we have to be a little bit careful about these things.